picture this. You're standing on a used car lot, right? You checked the online prices. You've walked around, kicking the tires. Maybe you even went as far as bringing a mechanic friend with you.
Yeah, you've done all your homework.
Exactly. You've done the homework. Everything looks great, and you make the deal. But then, like 3 days later, when a weird rattle starts under the hood or that little check engine light flickers on, you instantly feel it in your gut.
Oh, that sinking feeling.
You got scammed.
Yeah.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive. I'm your host, and we are not just looking at sleazy sales tactics today. Our mission is to explore the entire architecture of deception, the hidden costs of trust in our society, and why almost every transaction you make nowadays feels like, well, a defensive gamble.
Right, and we're pulling all this from a really fascinating source text titled The Architecture of Deception, the Cost of Trust. It uses that universally anxiety-inducing used car experience to crack open a massive societal issue.
It really does. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because that sinking feeling you get when the car rattles, that isn't just about bad spark plugs. That is about human behavior, economics, and a culture that seems, I don't know, engineered to reward manipulation.
It absolutely is. I mean, the used car lot functions as the perfect laboratory for human psychology. When you are standing on that asphalt, you're participating in a highly choreographed dance.
A dance where you don't really know the steps.
Exactly. The anxiety you feel in your gut is actually an entirely logical survival mechanism because you're in an environment built on asymmetric information.
Asymmetric information, meaning one person has all the cards.
Right. The seller knows everything about the vehicle's history, and you know almost nothing. What the source material breaks down so well is the specific misdirection playbook sellers use to exploit that gap.
And the choreography of that playbook is wild when you really look at it, because dishonest sellers don't just lie outright, do they? They curate the environment.
They absolutely do. It's highly controlled.
Yeah, they point enthusiastically to the exceptionally low mileage. They take you on a specific test drive route that conveniently avoids all the potholes, just to guarantee a smooth ride.
They highlight the brand new tires, the freshly detailed interior, they talk up the fuel economy.
Wait, I almost used an ellipsis there in my head, but yeah, they just build this solid wall of positivity.
What's fascinating here is the active intentionality behind what is not being said. The seller's silence is doing just as much heavy lifting as their pitch.
Okay, silence is a tool. Tell me more about that.
Well, while they are drawing your attention to that pristine upholstery, they are making a really calculated decision to omit the transmission issue. You know, the one that only slips when the car is cold?
Oh, right, because you're test driving a warmed-up car.
Exactly. Or they gloss over an accident history that was settled out of pocket and never reported to insurance. The shiny exterior is essentially weaponized to blind you to the expensive, inevitable repairs lurking just out of sight.
I mean, I hear you, but I'm struggling to buy this, at least in the modern era. Like, we live in the information age.
Sure, we have more data than ever.
Right. I can pull up a vehicle history report on my phone in 10 seconds. I can read 100 customer reviews about that specific dealership. I can compare local prices globally.
You can, yeah.
So if we are universally aware that these tricks exist, I mean, the sleazy car salesman is literally a cultural trope. How are we still falling for a shiny paint job when we have more data at our fingertips than any consumers in history? It's like a magician's sleight of hand. They make you look at the shiny new tires so you tune out the transmission noise. But if we know the magic trick, why does the illusion still work?
Because you're assuming the human brain processes all that data rationally in a high-stakes environment, and it just doesn't.
I mean, really, we don't use the data rationally?
No, not at all. The source explains that the illusion works because it directly targets our cognitive load. Think about the state of mind you are in during a major purchase.
Okay, I'm usually pretty stressed.
Stressed, worried about your budget, you have probably spent 3 weekends test driving vehicles, and you just want the process to be over. You are experiencing severe decision fatigue.
So my brain is essentially exhausted and looking for a way out.
Yes. When you are flooded with technical specs and market data, your brain experiences cognitive overload. To cope with that, it searches for a heuristic.
A heuristic, meaning
a mental shortcut. And the seller's confident, positive narrative provides that exact shortcut.
Oh, I see.
By highlighting benefits and hiding flaws, they offer a narrative that allows your exhausted brain to offload the critical thinking. You want to be convinced that you found a great deal so you can just go home.
So the seller is simply feeding your confirmation bias.
Exactly.
Which means the psychological reward system for the seller is incredibly powerful. They give us the easy answer, We buy the car, they get the money.
And that's why they keep doing it.
But the reason this used car mentality is so dangerous isn't about cars at all, is it? The incentive to hide flaws scales up. The psychological reward system for sellers is exactly the same, whether they are selling a Honda Civic, a high-end flat-screen TV, or like a multi-million-dollar corporate software contract.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, modern sales culture systemically rewards persuasion far more than it rewards transparency. We have built an economic model where aggressive marketing simply wins.
Right, across all industries.
Yes. Take real estate, for example. An agent who points out a crumbling foundation or poor drainage might lose the listing to an agent who is willing to look the other way and aggressively market the home's, quote, abundant natural light.
Oh, wow. Yeah, abundant natural light is definitely real estate speak for ignore the water damage.
Exactly. And in the tech world, software is frequently sold with impossible jargon that obscures a terrible back-end processor. The market financially penalizes the truth teller and heavily compensates the persuader.
Which creates a massive society-wide problem. Because buyers eventually figure it out. They buy the house with the bad foundation, or they buy the software that crashes on day one.
And they get burned.
They get burned. And the next time they enter the market, they are deeply suspicious. They walk into the transaction with their armor on.
And sellers immediately sense that hostility.
Right. They sense it and become defensive. So they develop even more aggressive, sophisticated persuasion tactics to overcome the buyer's newly formed resistance. It turns the marketplace into this perpetual arms race of deception.
An arms race is the perfect way to describe it.
So what does this all mean? If buyers hate feeling defensive and sellers hate dealing with hostile, suspicious customers, why do we collectively keep doing this stressful dance?
Well, the mechanism keeping us trapped is essentially an economic Mexican standoff.
A Mexican standoff.
Yeah, shifting that paradigm requires an immense amount of collective risk. No single seller wants to be the first one to unilaterally disarm.
Oh, I get it. Nobody wants to be the one guy telling the absolute unvarnished truth while their competitor is actively exaggerating and stealing all the market share.
Exactly. If you are the only completely transparent seller in a marketplace of exaggerators, your product will objectively look worse by comparison in the short term.
Because you are listing your flaws while the other guy is only listing his features.
Right. And in a corporate environment driven by quarterly earnings, short-term incentives like hitting this month's quota or closing the deal by Friday will almost always override the long-term benefits of building a trustworthy, transparent marketplace.
The system basically forces participants to optimize for the immediate transaction.
It does. It really does.
But if this defensive dance feels so inevitable, and the game theory of the marketplace forces everyone into this Mexican standoff, well, we really need to look at this globally.
That's a great point.
Because I'm wondering, does human nature simply default to deception anytime commerce is involved? Or does culture actually dictate the rules of engagement?
Culture heavily dictates the rules, and the geographical data in the source material is highly revealing on this front.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's examine Northern Europe. In many parts of Northern Europe, consumer trust is remarkably high. And that is not a byproduct of human nature. It is a meticulously engineered environment. They operate with significantly stronger consumer protection laws, which sets a rigid baseline.
So the law forces them to be honest.
More than that, the law creates a psychological safety net, which actually rewires the cultural baseline. When the legal framework aggressively punishes deception, the immediate cutthroat survival instinct is removed from the transaction.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it allows reputation to be viewed through a much longer-term lens. Honest business practices are socially rewarded, and hiding flaws is simply less normalized. Dishonesty obviously still exists everywhere, but the cultural threshold for what is considered an acceptable level of manipulation is entirely different.
Because the ecosystem supports honesty rather than punishing it.
Exactly.
Now contrast that with what the source describes in many developing economies. Because when resources are scarce, or the economic environment is highly volatile, the culture mechanics shift dramatically towards saving face.
Scarcity fundamentally alters behavior. When survival or economic stability is precarious, people learn to maximize every single advantage.
Right. You can't afford to lose.
You can't. So protecting appearances and avoiding embarrassment in a transaction become vital survival skills. In those volatile environments, the act of hiding defects or omitting truths slowly becomes normalized.
It just becomes part of doing business.
Yeah, it transitions from being viewed as malicious deception to being seen as a necessary part of the hustle,
Yeah.
a required skill to navigate a broken system.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When we look at our own modern Western markets, the contradiction is glaring. We publicly celebrate morality, honesty, and ethics, right?
Well, absolutely. We pride ourselves on it.
Yeah. We build our personal identities around being trustworthy. We
Mhm.
teach our kids not to lie. But the moment we enter the marketplace, we eagerly reward sales manipulation. The executive who uses smoke and mirrors to boost quarterly software sales, they get the bonus and the promotion.
This raises an important question about compartmentalization. We have engineered a culture where people speak incredibly highly of truth, yet quietly benefit from deception every single day.
It's pure hypocrisy.
It is. A person can consider themselves deeply principled, a pillar of their community, yet they will meticulously craft a misleading marketing campaign or hide a defect from a client the moment it serves their financial interest. They compartmentalize the behavior by telling themselves, that's just business.
The ultimate excuse, I'm just doing my job, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Right. But that specific contradiction, celebrating truth in our personal lives while rewarding deception in our economic lives, is ground zero for the collapse of consumer trust.
You can't trust anyone at work.
You cannot maintain a high-trust society when everyday business interactions require you to assume the person across the table is actively lying to you. The psychological tool of constantly playing detective is what we call a trust tax.
A trust tax, I like that.
And it makes everything in society move slower and cost more.
Which brings us to the core paradox of this entire deep dive. If we live in an environment where deception is the normalized standard, and unilateral disarmament is an economic Mexican standoff,
Yeah.
how does an honest business actually survive?
It's tough.
It seems like admitting your product's flaws up front would be absolute corporate suicide. You'd just be eaten alive by competitors who are promising the moon.
You would think so, but the source points to a fascinating phenomenon called the anti-sell.
The anti-sell.
Yeah, it is wildly counterintuitive, but the data shows that radical transparency, especially when applied in a low-trust environment, creates the fiercest, most resilient customer loyalty imaginable.
How does that actually work mechanically, though? If I walk into a dealership and the guy tells me the transmission is acting up, I'm walking away.
Not necessarily. Think of a buyer's suspicion like a heavy-duty software firewall. When you enter a transaction, your mental firewall is up, scanning every single word the seller says for a threat or a hidden catch.
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely doing that.
You are exhausting your cognitive resources trying to protect yourself. The anti-sell works by voluntarily triggering the alarm on a minor flaw.
Oh, I see. By admitting a flaw up front, the seller effectively disables the buyer's mental firewall.
Precisely. If a B2B software vendor sits down and says, look, our platform is fantastic for data visualization, but quite frankly, our competitors' back-end integration is faster, and if that's your priority, you shouldn't buy from us.
Wow. Hearing that completely short-circuits the buyer's defensive stance.
It does. You suddenly realize you don't have to play the role of the detective anymore. The seller has done the investigating for you. Because they handed you the key, you stop trying to batter down the door.
That makes total sense. Your firewall drops.
And the rest of the seller's pitch gets downloaded directly into your trusted memory.
That is an incredible mechanism. It's like finding water in a desert. We see this in real estate too, right?
Yeah.
The source highlights agents who point out the water damage in the basement before the buyer even has to ask.
Yes.
In a marketplace absolutely flooded with exaggeration where everyone is shouting about how flawless and revolutionary their product is, plain, unvarnished honesty becomes incredibly rare. And rarity is exactly what creates ultimate credibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Honesty isn't just a moral high ground to make a company feel good about itself. It is an elite competitive advantage.
By refusing to play the short-term manipulation game, the radically transparent seller offloads the cognitive burden from the buyer. They aren't just selling a house or a software package, they are selling peace of mind.
And people will pay for that.
Absolutely. As the source emphasizes, in a low-trust society, peace of mind is the single most valuable commodity on the market. When a buyer finds a seller who offers that cognitive relief, they cling to them.
And they probably recommend them to everyone they know.
Yes, simply to spare their network the exhaustion of the defensive dance.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's distill this into the core takeaway for you, the listener, as you navigate this landscape. The overarching lesson from the architecture of deception is this. Human beings are incredibly resilient.
We really are.
People can actually accept flaws. If you tell someone a product has a limitation, they can factor that into their decision and live with it. What they absolutely cannot accept, what fundamentally breaks the system, is concealment.
Concealment is the real poison.
Yeah, a hidden flaw hurts your wallet, but a hidden truth destroys your trust.
And the societal cost of that destroyed trust is astronomical. When those small deceptions, the glossed-over transmission slip, the manipulated real estate photos, the buried terms of service, when those become the standard expectation, trust slowly vanishes from the culture.
It just evaporates.
A society without trust is an exhausting, expensive place to live. It leaves us in a permanent defensive crouch where every single purchase feels like a gamble.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of deception. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over.
Oh, this should be good.
We've talked extensively about how the marketplace has trained you to expect deception, and how you likely view transactions as defensive gambles. You walk onto that car lot or into that boardroom with your armor firmly on, ready for a fight.
Armed to the teeth.
But consider this. How might your own deep-seated suspicion, your own aggressive defensive posture, be inadvertently signaling to others that they shouldn't even bother trying to be honest with you?
That's a profound point.
If you walk into every room expecting a scam, demanding impossible perfection at rock-bottom prices, are you creating a dynamic where only a scammer can succeed? Are we, in our desperate attempt to protect ourselves, letting the used car mindset turn us into the exact kind of cynical participants we despise? Think about that the next time you're kicking the tires.